Hello and welcome to episode 68 of the 40 Athletes podcast. I'm your co-host Jason Holzer along with Jimmy Huber on this Ash Wednesday. Jimmy, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. And yourself?
Doing good, man. I went to church early this morning. Got my spirit all ready to go for today. It's a sunny day outside. It's gonna be 80 degrees today, man. So
I don't know where you're at, but it's going to be, they say 76 where I'm at. So we're only 4 off, but I'm like, yeah, sun's
but
out,
still, hey,
chirping, springtime's coming. Let's go.
we've been on March Gladness all week as well with our buddies at Sharewaves at ESPN Radio. But every episode, Jimmy, we try to pack with tips, strategies, and solutions to help people have a better sports experience and to gain unique insights and knowledge from some of the best minds in the sports world. And today we got Ian Goldberg on. And Ian Goldberg is the CEO and founder of iSport 360. He's a former economic advisor for 2 presidents. Now, I just learned this, but he was an advisor for Bill Clinton and George Bush Sr., the first one. So he saw it on both perspectives. I thought it was pretty interesting.
Well, it's interesting. He was with a Democrat and Republican. So
right. Normally
there you go.
Normally it's both sides. And then he's also on the advisory board for the National Alliance of Youth Sports. I know we've been on the Kansas City physical activity plan, so it'll be interesting to get his perspective on that as well. So
do I need to get somebody else to come on this to talk with the guy as sharp as this? Do we need to have somebody else replace us or what? Are we sharp enough to talk this guy?
Hey, no, maybe, but we're excited to have him on. And most importantly, he's the father of 2 daughters, and you and I are both passionate about fatherhood and the role that sports can play with it. So we're going to go ahead and bring Ian on today. Ian, good morning to you.
Hey, greetings, guys. Good morning.
Well, Ian, first of all, I'd like to just go ahead and dive right in. One of the things you like to talk about, and I've seen on iSport 360, some of the blog posts you put, was this concept of fun versus winning. And can you just take us to a little bit like, how can we make sports more fun again and not so much worried about the winning piece of it on the scoreboard, but, winning in life and making sports again just something that we love to do?
Yep. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me on the show today, guys. I'm pretty thrilled to be here with you. This is a topic that we talk about a lot at our company, and it's something we really are trying to help in youth sports. I think every parent, every coach would agree they want their kids first and foremost to have fun in their games, right? So we always start the season and we say, guys, it's not, especially at the young ages, it's not about winning, it's about having fun. Let's make sure the kids have fun. But in my experience, when my kids were young, you start a season and maybe you lose a couple of games and the parents start to say like, well, don't we need to do a little better? But wait a minute, it was just about fun. And then the parents start to get frustrated because the team may not be doing as well as they hoped. And the parents start to struggle with this dilemma. On the one hand, I want this to be about fun. I want my kids to have a great time. But on the other hand, I'm sitting on the sideline like a stress case, really struggling to sit still while my child is failing out there. So, we've taken a dive into the psychology behind that, the psyche of the sports parent. So there's really a lot to break down, and it's very relevant to a lot of things you guys talk about.
Hey, and I want to get into this because I've dealt with this year. Now I've coached from high school to college, but I also coach youth. And I've a lot of times been like 6th, 7th, and 8th. Well, I have a son that's a 3rd grader. Okay. So he has this kind of rec team and there's a coach that's coaching it. And he asked me to help out. And the idea, like you said, 3rd graders, hey, let's have fun. Let's enjoy it. But what's happened is there's an app called Game Changer, right? And I think Dick's or whatever. And it's fine, but they keep stats. They have videos, they have analysis, they have all this stuff. So we got a guy on the bench that's keeping stats. They're talking about having fun. The kids are like you said, they're at the beginning of the season, they're asking about the score. What's the score? Are we winning or losing? Like, guys, don't worry about that. So you have this side where the parents, they want to succeed. The kids want to succeed. The parents want the kids to have fun. They want their kids to have equal opportunities. But I'm like, you can't have all of this, right? So how do you discuss with parents and get coaches to understand like the balance of having fun and being competitive and enjoying the season?
Well, I would start with just taking a look at Norway, who just dominated the Winter Olympics. They dominate every Olympics. And there have been many articles written, and we wrote one recently about why Norway is so successful. I mean, there's a country where they don't even start to have travel teams until the kids are like 12 or 13 years old. They don't keep standings until the kids are 13 years old. They don't have a commercial industry around coaching youth sports. It's all parents. And in a lot of cases, the parents, even the other team parents, are actually coming to practice and training and playing with the kids. It's a really healthy culture, and it really keeps the focus on just letting kids play. Don't make it expensive. Don't make it stressful. And by the way, side note, I am not a fan of participation trophies, and I love to win. But I'm just saying, sometimes when we're too active and involved in the kids' training when they're in third grade, it actually has the reverse effect that we want it to. So
I think for me, and I've dealt with this third grade team, they practice once a week for an hour. And then you're going to play in these competitive games. You're trying to get the kids to understand conceptually defense, how to match up, how to keep them between you and the basket, how to help, how to recover. Offensively, you're trying to teach them some concepts on spacing, but they're so low skilled. And then you're like, well, we got to work on dribbling. We got to work on passing. We got to work on footwork. And you're trying to balance all this out and trying to have fun in the same time within an hour, but you're trying to get them ready to play because people want to succeed and be competitive as well. So like you said, it's like, how do you coordinate the limited practice time and getting people to understand we're going to have fun and still be competitive within that process? Because as you keep track of scores, like people start having standings and scores, and it becomes competitive in that process.
Yep. So let's talk about basketball for just a second, which is your sport. I mean, I find coaching basketball to be one of the hardest things because you're generally in a very closed space in a gym, and you can hear every comment from the bleachers, every parent screaming out to their kid. And so we have this other article we wrote. The title of the article was called "Shoot is the most dangerous word in youth basketball." And it's because when I sit in the bleachers, I hear all of the parents and grandparents yelling out, especially to the third and fourth and fifth graders, "Shoot, shoot." And that is just like the pinnacle of taking the experience away from these kids. Let them make the decisions out there. Let them learn to make decisions. Let them make mistakes. So I just encourage parents on the sidelines to bring your cup of coffee, enjoy it, relax, try to have the discipline to not be yelling out at your third, fourth, fifth graders on the basketball court. And that's how we just create a better environment.
Hey, Jason, I know you want to jump in on something. I want to say this at the end. I do that, like shoot. They'll be yelling shoot, and there's like three people on them, and they can't even like shoot the ball over it. It's not even going to be a good shot. How can they shoot it? So just want to reinforce, yelling 100%. Shoot, they're not even open.
Well, and Ian, what I want to get to is like, why is yelling shoot so detrimental? Like, let's get into like the psychology of the kid playing, right? They're trying to play, and all of a sudden they hear shoot from one side, and they hear the coach yelling pass from the other side. Like, what kind of confusion is that creating inside the kid's mind to where they almost end up feel like doing nothing because they have so many mixed messages coming out? Can you explain a little bit about the what's maybe going on in a kid's mind as he's hearing these multiple voices coming from all angles?
And Jason, Ian, the other thing is when you hear I don't know if you ever heard this, where the parents yell, drive, and there's like three people around them. They have nowhere to drive.
It doesn't matter what the parents yell. It is robbing the child of the ability to make a decision on their own. It's confusing as hell because, like you said, when the parents are yelling shoot and there's 2 or 3 defenders on that player, they're probably going to shoot because 7, 8, 9-year-olds, they listen to what their parents say, and if their parents yell shoot, that's what they're going to do. It's not the right thing to do at the time. So here's this poor kid out there. They're probably fairly new to the sport. Their parents are yelling at them, and they've been trained their whole life. When their parent yells at them, they're supposed to listen to what they say. They have a coach calling instructions from the other side of the court. In a lot of cases, it's the complete opposite, right? So the parent is yelling drive, the coach is yelling swing the ball to the open side. And it's confusing, it's frustrating, it's stressful. And all of these things in totality take the fun out of the game for the kids. And so it makes me want to go back to an earlier generation. Like when I was 8 years old, my parents dropped me at the practice. They left. I don't know where they went. I'm not sure they even cared about what I was doing at practice. They just knew that I was leaving the field or the court with a smile with my buddies. And today, I think because there's so much money involved and so much money on the line, parents are spending a lot of money on their kids' sports. It makes them so vested in the progress, the process, the expectations.
Well, and Ian, just further into that, like what are a few strategies that parents can implement right away to help them not only stay calm themselves, but also make the experience better for their kids, as well as not see it as an investment, but as an opportunity for your kid to socialize, have healthy physical activity, and be out doing something they love to do without the pressure of having to perform, if you will.
Yep. Well, the first thing we have to acknowledge, Jason, is like parents need to recognize their behavior and the fact that their kids' youth sports sometimes just takes over their body and their words. As an example, I think there's a lot of nice parents in your neighborhood. You may be friends with them, but when they show up at their kid's soccer game or basketball game and that game starts and maybe their kid gets beat or gets knocked down, they suddenly are overcome by the stress hormones. And by the way, I'm not a psychologist, but I've spoken to enough to understand this process. Your stress hormones, your cortisol levels put you in fight or flight mode. And at that field, you are now doing things and saying things without even thinking about it. And you become just a different person. So that's the first thing. Adults just need to have the discipline to understand that before it even kicks in. And there's techniques. I mean, there's a lot of research on this, but there's really techniques you could use, but you need to capture yourself before you start yelling at the ref, the coach, your child. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you've probably seen lots of articles written about the drive home, right? Parents think that is the ideal time to review the game, talk to their child about what they could be doing better. When in fact, your child just emptied the gas tank on the field, the court, the ice rink. They have nothing left to give. And the last thing they want to do at that moment is actually talk to you. So that's really self-serving for the parents. Best thing to do is drive home, let your kids rest, relax, talk to their friends, get their mind on other things. And then later that night or the next day, that's a much better time to talk to these kids about what they might be doing better. And I love asking them what they think they could be doing better rather than us just immediately telling them. So those are a few techniques.
Hey, Ian, I want to dive into some of that. One is this. I think parents need to understand this is your child's experience. It's not yours, right? Because too many parents make it about their experience. I think that's one thing. And if you are investing this type of money in these clubs and you're paying coaches or whatever, then trust the coaches. If you find a coach you know, like, and trust, right? And the last thing I wanted to bring up, you mentioned, is you can talk about that, like, giving your child that experience, but also you talk about techniques that parents can have. I think when they go into games, what are strategies? We talk about players being mindful. We talk about strategies they can have when they're having difficulties in games. I think parents need to go on the plan too, is how can I be mindful when things are happening to my child to get me emotional? What can I do to get myself settled back down where I'm not so reactive? I'm responding in a positive way.
We all need to be a little more mindful, right? I mean, it's not easy to do. It takes discipline. We encourage our kids to be mindful, but I like the point you just started with, which is this is your kid's experience. Whether you're paying $3,000 a year or whether you're paying $100 per year, it's really your kid's experience. The coaches that they get are not going to be professional NBA, NFL, MLB coaches. And I have to admit, it's hard for me sometimes to sit on my own on the sidelines of my kids' games and watch the coaches. There are things I want to say, there are things I would do differently. But the fact is, these coaches, in most cases, are volunteering their time, which is something we're not all able to do or willing to do. So we have to trust the coach, and we have to find ways to reinforce the coach. One thing that really crushes a kid's youth sports experience is when the coach is telling them a bunch of things to do and their parents are not on the same page and telling them very different things to do. Just one very typical example. I coach soccer. Every parent is telling their kid before the game, how many goals are you going to score today? When the coach is saying to them, I want to see good footwork, I want to see good passing, I want to see good communication on the field, I want to see awareness, good passes. So that's what these kids have to deal with. And I hope I answered some of the questions.
Yeah, and I think, like you mentioned,
good.
is like in soccer, you got 11, 13, 14, whatever kids, maybe on a roster, and they score maybe like 2 goals a game, 3 goals a game. Like everybody's not going to score a goal, right? So it's almost parents understanding like your child might have a certain role that's beneficial for the team, but might not be scoring goals. But I want to get into this part. We talk about let it be your child's experience, but parents are probably sitting there going, well, what if a coach is doing certain things that aren't productive for a child, that you see that they need to change approach that's not effective? When do you tell parents it's okay to maybe step up and communicate to a coach, and what would be the best ways of going about communicating to a coach?
So that's always risky, right? It's always risky to start stepping on the coach's toes. It's what makes volunteer coaches not want to volunteer a coach, is dealing with frustrated parents, angry parents, but it happens. I would say 100% of the time, the way to accomplish your goal without upsetting the coach is have your child talk to the coach. Maybe if your kids are very young, you may need to be the one to say to the coach, hey coach, is it okay if my son talks to you after practice today? Because an 8-year-old boy maybe doesn't know how to start the conversation. But if you send your child to communicate on their own behalf, whether it's about more playing time, whether it's about what can I be doing better, whether it's about I'm not getting along with my teammates, if you send a child, it totally diffuses any awkwardness or competition between parent and coach, and usually it gets you to the result you want. Not to mention, like, this generation of kids, they need to be talking on for themselves rather than having mom and dad do it. We are all guilty of like helicoptering.
Well, Ian actually had a situation like this. A parent emailed me and said, "Hey, I'd like to speak with you in person." And I was like, "Okay, but before we do that, let me and your son have a conversation first, and then if you feel like we still need to converse, then no big deal." And me and the 7th grade boy had a conversation. I even, as a coach, I was like, "Hey, man, you were gone last week. I didn't communicate what we were doing in practice, so I can see how you would feel this way. I apologize." So I, as a coach, like, being aware of my own mistakes that I'm going to make and talking to the kid first. And I never heard from the parent because me, like you mentioned, me and the player worked it out. So the parent was like, "Okay, good, we're good." So that just to validate what you're talking about
I
of
think what you're
coaches
saying
and
too,
players.
Jason,
I
Ian,
like that,
is like
Jason.
we are developing kids through the sport, right? So if you have your child talking to the coach, they develop a skill set of being able to talk to a teacher, talk to a coach later, talk to a supervisor, right? And I'll tell the parents all the time, you have an issue, have your child, as you said, Ian, talk to me. If they're not old enough, you can be in the same facility. And if we can't work it out together, then you can have a meeting with me at that time. Something I'd really like to get into, though, Ian, I feel like youth sports is broken. I mean, a lot of things that are going on. How can we develop a better youth sports culture with coaches and administrators and parents more working together in the right way to get these great experiences for the kids that are playing sports?
Where should we begin, Jim? I mentioned Norway only because learning from Norway is a pretty timely theme right now, and we're hearing about different efforts within our country, whether it's from the Aspen Institute or whether it's from the National Alliance for Youth Sports, or some of the national governing bodies in sports, to try to adopt what Norway has done. The thing that's working against us is that youth sports is now a $20 billion a year industry. And there's a lot of people with a lot of money on the line and a lot of interests. And so Norway's approach might hurt some of those financial interests. I think some of the Jim, some of the specific themes we should be focusing on is, number one, how do we bring down the cost of youth sports so that everyone has an equal chance to play and an equal chance to have the same caliber of experience? I think the second thing is, how do we encourage free play? When we were growing up, we rode our bikes to the park and we organized games ourselves. We picked teams, we kept score, we negotiated disagreements. I mean, those are some of my best childhood memories. And unfortunately, that's not happening right now with this generation of kids. I thought for a split second during the pandemic, when youth sports got shut down, I thought we were going to have a moment of learning, because kids started going out in the yard and going to the park and riding their bikes because they weren't allowed at their schools, the gyms, the sports facilities. I thought we were going to move in a direction where kids were just going to stay outside and just have fun, be outside, be active, be healthy. But we very quickly got back to the same routine. So, I think there's a few themes here, and that is, how do we bring down cost? How do we encourage kids to engage in free play? And I will tell you, one of the other challenges here is parents think the more money they spend on training is going to impact their child's sports development. And I think you guys can confirm, when we were kids, it wasn't more training that made you awesome. It was the desire to get outside on the driveway, shoot baskets, and figure out how to beat your friend one-on-one. That's how you learned your technique, your moves, your discipline, your drive. So, the FOMO, the fear of missing out, the fear that other kids are going to have more training than your child, is what's making parents want to spend more money on their kids.
Don't you think, though, also, I think we got to get out of the win at all costs society. And I think there's too much egos involved. And I experienced this when I was young. Coaching, it was about me, right? My team won, lost. If we won, hey, great. If we lost, I was upset. And it's more a reflection of myself. And as I've aged as a coach, I realized there's a reason why I do coach. And it's like to use the sport as that vehicle to transform lives through what I do. And understanding whether we win or lose, we can learn and grow through our experiences, right? And it's what the child's becoming through the sport. But I feel like as coaches and as parents, the egos get involved, and we're winning at all costs, and we're getting this not so healthy environment in youth sports.
That's a parent issue. That's not a kid issue. If you watch 10-year-olds play a little league game and they lose, watch their reaction after the game. For about 4.5 minutes, they might be upset, and then they're ready for ice cream, pizza, go hang out with their friends, go play video games. Watch the parents leaving the field. They will talk about that game, for 24 to 48 hours, be frustrated about it. They're going to look forward to meeting that opponent again. This is a parent issue. We just need to remove ourselves from that equation. I have a little bit of a luxury here in my own neighborhood. Most of the people here know that I write a newsletter that reaches 175,000 people in the youth sports community. It has definitely impacted their behavior on the sidelines. And it's kind of comical. I would never, ever, by the way, embarrass any of these people and put them in my newsletter or capture video of them acting silly. But I guess maybe the threat of it is something that keeps them in line. And so I feel like here in my community, we've built a really nice culture. where parents are encouraged to support everything we do, but they know that their sideline behavior, their behavior in the car ride home, and the way they talk to their kids really can either make it a super fun experience or really ruin the kids' experience.
I think having more of these parent groups, this culture you can create. I do agree with the parent side, but I think also too, Ian, the coaches. I mean, I see coaches like sometimes like during a game or even after games, like cussing at kids, saying things to kids, like getting so emotional and saying things that can be detrimental because again, their pride, their ego is involved in the game. And I feel like they don't have maybe a true coaching purpose, a mission of why they do coach. Do you see that as well?
100%. I think you and I have talked in the past about kind of our old school philosophy, coaching philosophy. Like I've been to a lot of coaching seminars and conferences that were a little old school in their thinking in the sense that they really taught you more about team culture and bonding in the sense of like supporting your teammate, putting your hand on your teammate's shoulder, actually making a physical contact and letting them know that you are there for them. Like that's very old school thinking versus newer coaches who are just focused on the X's and the O's. So I think there's a lot of coaches need training. On the one hand, we're talking about we want volunteer coaches, right? We want parents to step up and help. But on the other hand, a lot of those parents are not really equipped to be educators, to be trainers and experts in their sport, to be diplomats, right? They have to be the liaison to the parents and the club and everything. It's asking a lot. So I think we may need to lower our expectations a little bit because even though there's lots of good organizations training millions of coaches, it's just never going to be enough. What do you think, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, I think the other thing that's got to happen is I see organizations in general pop up and they want to have all these teams and these kids in it, and they're like, we're gonna have 30 teams or whatever teams. I'm like, that's great. Who are your coaches, and what are you doing to train your coaches? Do you have systems they can follow? Because, like you said, even if it's a volunteer type organization, and I was running it, I'd have like an online system to understand. Here's our practices. Here's the layout. Here's the flow of them. Here's a template. Here's videos here to show you the drills. Here's things we're gonna and they have like they can go step by step by step and follow it, and you can give them these systems that they can implement because some of these individuals, they don't have time to try to research and find all this information. So I think we need to do a better job of providing materials to mentor them.
Definitely agree with that. I think you're right. You have to have the systems in place before you launch the club. But I'll give you a firsthand example. Here in my suburban New Jersey neighborhood, not far from New York, we probably have 5 different independent basketball clubs that my daughters can choose to play on if they want to. The problem is there's so many choices. Each one of them is at risk of failing, financially failing, like every few months. So the girls go to one club and then that one's in jeopardy. So they have to go to another one and another one. And I think the reason that they're all failing is, first of all, there's no critical mass in one place, but there's also none of them have great systems, great curriculum, great best practices, and even great technology, which is, my forte. They need all of those things in place before they can just go and start a basketball club, right?
Yeah, and going back to what you said about like Jim said about coaches and what you say to your players. Well, I saw this quote one time that really like hit me as a parent. It said, "Your external voice becomes your child's internal voice," and I was like, "Oh, that was like okay." And so like,
Yeah.
and as a coach and as a teacher, I'm like, that applies to my students. That applies to the people. So like, I have become very aware of how I say something, not just what I say, because you can say anything in the world, but if it comes across as an angry tone or frustrated tone, that becomes the kid's inner voice to themselves. I'm like, so just to go back, I wanted to mention that because whenever I saw that quote, it was a profound one that made me stop in my tracks and think, how am I saying what I'm saying, to these players, to my own kids, you name it, because I want them to have a positive inner voice. But if I'm not portraying that myself externally, then I'm going to get mixed results.
That's a great quote. And the fact that, Jason, the fact that you're an educator and you're a coach and a parent probably makes you perfectly sensitive to every word you're using with your students, with your players on your teams. If you're also a trained psychologist, maybe that would be the fourth dimension that would really round everything out. But we need to be all of those things when we're coaching kids and when you're teaching them in the classrooms too. That's a great quote.
Yeah. And, we talk about building a better coach and why it's needed, but how important is the social emotional piece of this? If building a better culture, what will it do to our, feeling better about ourselves, and the kids around us for the next generation of building happy, healthy individuals by using sport, by building that better culture, like you mentioned?
Well, social and emotional learning is obviously, like, it's come to the forefront in the last few years, but especially during this pandemic, because kids have been struggling so much, sitting at home, not being able to go to school for a year. We have a generation of kids that are way more comfortable my kids call it talking. When they're snapping their friends, they call it talking, but it's on this device. It's not people verbalizing with each other, which is really funny. But let's talk about social and emotional learning in sports. Not many coaches are trained to think that way. Not many coaches take on the job of coach with the intention of making these kids, better human beings or more well-rounded. So culturally, I think in this country, we have a little, there's a little bit of a separation or division here. So we need to put more emphasis on the social and emotional side of things. As you know, Jason, sport is like an ideal place for kids to hone these skills. So going back to the example you shared about when you talked to that seventh grade player without, having to talk to his parent, you accomplished so many things from that conversation. First of all, you told the kid how you felt. But second of all, you now gave that child ownership over this situation. You gave that child accountability over remedying this situation. You gave that child awareness of where he stands on your team and in comparison to your view of how the other players are playing. This is all about empowerment, self-awareness. These are such important things. And in that one conversation, you did all of that. And we just need to do more of that.
I think in like the emotional intelligence, though, parents need to get better because they're a reflection for their children. The children are going to act the way they act at times. They're going to mirror them. But coaches, and we've seen it recently with like Juwan Howard and Greg Gard, throwing a punch after shaking hands in a line. And the kids start going nuts. They start almost fighting. And then you look at, I bring this up, like Danny Hurley's at UConn. He gets going crazy on the sideline. He gets a technical. He's starting to go after the officials. And I see this all the time with coaches, like you got two assistants holding them back, like they're going to go fight the official. Like, you got to hold me back. I'm going to go fight you. And then all of a sudden, then he starts getting the fans going crazy against the official, which is against the rules. He gets a double tech and gets kicked out. And in my mind, I'm like, what are we doing? Like, as these coaches, these college high-level coaches, and you got high school coaches watching them, you got youth coaches watching them, you got parents watching them, you got kids watching them, like, well, hey, that's high-level people. They act like that. It's okay for me to act like that. And it's not. And for me, coaches, we have to get better of handling our emotions under these situations and respond in a positive way to show other people the right way. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. So you're right. Coaches at that level are role models for sure. Getting in a fight in the high five line at the end of the game is abysmal. And I think Juwan Howard realized that afterward. But I want to share a story about how important the high five line is and how that should be the opposite of confrontational. About 3 years ago, I took my family to Israel, and because my kids love soccer, I had an opportunity to bring them to a place where Israeli children and Palestinian children train soccer together. The coaches are bilingual. By the way, have you ever heard of that? Nobody hears about that. People need to know this is going on there. The coaches are bilingual, and the kids are, for the most part, they were all boys. So I bring my two daughters there, and before they start the game, they have a high five line. The coaches lead their teams and they shake hands with the other team. Why? Because they are starting off by thanking the other team for the opportunity to be out there competing, training, learning, improving. Then at the end of the game, of course, they do it again. But I thought that was the coolest thing, to actually go to your opponent before the game and say, like, thank you for being here for me today. Thank you for being here for my team, so that we can compete and we can all become stronger here. It's just a different way of looking at things. I don't think that's what Juwan Howard was exactly thinking about when he was walking down the high five line.
Well, like as a kid, I hated to lose. I was the worst person whenever I lost. I was, but as you got older, you realize like it's a game. Like the sun's going to come up the next day. Like it's okay to feel disappointed. It's okay to feel upset, if you don't, you come out on top. But what sports provides for us is that opportunity to win with grace, lose with humility, and realize like there's always a chance to get better, and you're more likely going to get another opportunity. But how you compete, your actions through before your words, how do you handle adversity, all these kind of things. And I like how you mentioned like, hey, thank you for showing up, like bringing gratitude in for us to be able even just to play in the first place. I think we live in America, such a competitive society, like, oh, I got to beat you to get to the top, or, that's where it seems like over in Israel, it's more of a, hey, let's collaborate and let's play. And you know what, we'll move on, do whatever's next after we get done. I think, how do we get to more of a culture like that, where it's, more gratitude, more collaboration? You play, whatever happens, it happens, and learn from it and move on.
Yeah, and by the way, those are Israelis and Palestinians who have been at war for 40 years, and they're still able to do it. We can't shake hands with like the guy from the Little League in the next town. So we do need to do more of that. But I like your point about teaching perseverance and teaching kids how to win gracefully, but how to learn from the loss. You posted something this morning on LinkedIn, Jason. I think it said something about, it's not about how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get up. And I have to say, as the founder of an early stage technology company, I have learned more than any time in my life how to overcome challenges, how to overcome losses, how to overcome people not believing that you could do what you say you're going to do, all of that. And I think that is such an important lesson in sports. So learning how to lose. And by the way, I think Jason, I was maybe worse than you when I was a kid. I probably cried after every loss.
Oh.
Even when I was like a bench warmer and I wasn't even in the game, I didn't even have much on the line. Like when I was 8, I probably cried after every loss. So learning how to come back from that, learning how to push through. And the good news about this generation of kids is they've had over the last 2 years, they've had some pretty immense challenges. So, losing a basketball game really should pale in comparison to having to be locked in your house for a year and a half. So I hope we could build that culture a little bit more.
Hey, when you talk about these kids, what they've been through the last couple of years, I mean, there's a mental health challenge, right? And they talk about anxiety being up, depression being up, right? And you hear coaches a lot of times going like, yeah, so like, I got to be a counselor now. I got to be like a sports psychologist now. What would be your message and maybe some strategies that coaches could implement to help them with the kids that they're coaching to be more resilient, but to help them with their like emotional intelligence?
Yep. I'm glad you brought that up, Jim, because I think now, because of the pandemic, because of the lockdowns and the mask mandates, I think now more than ever, every coach needs to tone down their rhetoric to their kids just a little bit and be sensitive to how that child is receiving your criticism, your instructions, your challenges. We need to be very sensitive to that right now. We have all been put through so much in the last 2 years. So every coach, I don't care if you're a trained educator, a trained psychologist, a coach who's had years of training experience, we all just need to put on the hat of the counselor. We need to do it just a little bit. We don't need to be experts in it, but we need to recognize, first of all, let's recognize kids who are at risk. Let's recognize kids on our team who maybe are like really disconnected, not engaging, not talking to their teammates, not talking to coach, not really interested in their sport or their training. Those are signs of a kid at risk. Then let's look at the other kids that maybe are not super at risk, but they're struggling. Maybe they're a little quieter than usual. Actually, on the opposite side, maybe they're coming to practices and they're just like, they can't focus. They're hyped up. They're running around, not listening to coach. Maybe this is covering up the fact that they're struggling to focus right now. So we need to be very conscious of these things, more conscious than ever before. So, in terms of strategies, I believe that letting your kids have an outlet to communicate is really important. So I'm coaching my daughter's U13 team. These girls are all basically 12 years old. We start every practice by talking about the last game, talking about what they want to get out of the practice. I don't care if we talk about, their favorite video game or TV program. Letting the kids speak is so important. I do not want to start practice by me giving them a seminar, especially when they've been at school all day. So, I think just letting the kids talk, giving them an outlet is probably one of the most important things we could be doing, and keeping an eye on their mental health as well.
Yeah. Well, Ian, man, it's been great having you on the show today, but we always finish with the 4 questions with 40 athletes. So these are lightning round questions to get that last tidbit of wisdom from our guest. And the first question is this: in your opinion, what does it mean to win in the game of life?
Oh, that just means waking up every day and being proud of how you have impacted others.
That's a good one. Simple, but profound. I like that.
Lightning. Let's go. Fire away, Jason.
That's right. Number 2, if you could spend time with anyone in sports, alive, passed away, fictional, non-fictional, who would you pick? And then why would you choose that person?
Oh, wow. Well, I've had the privilege of meeting some legends in sports from years ago. Years ago, I actually went to a Dodger baseball fantasy camp where I got to talk to guys who played baseball in the 1950s, when sports was about competing, having fun, teammates, teams stuck together. These guys didn't make money. They actually struggled to find second jobs. So anyway, I loved talking to people from that generation of sports, because I think sports has really just, gone away from the sports and more towards the money now. So I think that's my general answer. But Carl Erskine was the Dodger who I sat and spoke to the most. He was a superstar pitcher for the Dodgers in the 1940s and 50s.
Ian, I don't think people realize that, because I had an uncle that played semi-pro and a little Major League Baseball, but he used to, like, in the off season, he'd be like doing cultivating weeds. He'd be working, like, he had odd jobs. Played. Like, you look at the professional athletes today, like, I think some of them forget people that paved the way for what they have today.
Yeah, Mickey Mantle got a $3,000 bonus, I believe, a $3,000 bonus the year that he won the Triple Crown.
Yeah, it's
Are you
crazy
kidding
when you
me?
think about the legends and what he'd be paid today, like if he was playing. The third question is this: what's the best advice you ever received from a coach you played for or worked for?
I learned a lot from a coach who's worked with NBA teams, and his name is Jerry Lynch. And I've attended some of his conferences, which are called Way of Champions. He really taught me about the importance of team culture and how that leads to victories. It's a little bit of like the long-term outlook, but he's the one who taught me about helping teammates connect culturally, spiritually, in some cases physically, helping teammates understand that you would do whatever it takes for them, to help them, to support them. I learned so much from Jerry Lynch, so he's probably the person I would go with.
Hey, and I when I get in this, I know Jason says lightning rod round, but I tend to get out of the lightning right round. I want to ask you this on Jerry, when you talk about developing this team culture, right? These teammates caring for each other together. What are like 3 tips and strategies if a coach is listening, like they can implement with their teams that help their, their athletes and their teammates that they have with each other be more connected?
I love having the team start practice by talking about what they could have done better. What first talking about what the team could have done better, but then sometimes that becomes kids on the team saying, "Well, like our goalie should have done this." Every bit of input they have has to start with I could have done this better. I could have done that better. I think it's a great exercise. We've been using it recently even after some like tremendous losses. So have the kids talk about what the team and they specifically can be doing better. I think that's really important.
The last question is this. If you had one character trait or life skill and you had a team and you had athletes going to be playing for you and they could only have one life skill or character trait, what would it be and why?
Damn, that's a good question, Jim. Uh, I would say being great communicators, because it's something that I think is really lacking in kids today. And I think if you're a great communicator, you can overcome you can overcome almost anything because you know how to talk about it. If you're struggling in some way, you could tell your teammates, you could tell your coach. If there's something you want to learn and improve upon, you could talk about that. I think it's a really important skill in sports, in life, in school.
Okay, off the lightning round again. Communication is so key. How do you get kids? How do they become better communicators? What are some strategies? Because there's so much like in their iPhones, their iPads, and stuff like that.
Well, look, you're talking to a guy who launched a company and an app that encourages kids and coaches to communicate on their phones, and give them some best practices and tools to do that. But the reason I did that, Jim, is kids of this generation are on their phone. They are not leaving their phone. Like we can't. This train is out of the station, and we can't bring it back. That being said, the beautiful thing about practice is when they're at practice, they cannot take their phones out. I get furious if I ever see a kid even take it out for 1 second. So, being at practice is a great place to get them to be better communicators, to use their verbal skills. We really reinforce it. Like when we're doing indoor soccer drills, we are really reinforcing. I don't care if you're using your verbal skills to call out the name of the player you're passing to, or whether you're saying man on and telling your teammate that there's a defender coming on to them. I need to hear that. And it's so hard with this generation of kids, but I think really focusing on forcing them to do that. And I'll just add one last thing, and that is when we do this exercise where I ask all the kids on the team like what we could be doing better, there's always 4 or 5 girls that they love talking. They raise their hand immediately. And then there's always a group that they hate talking. They do not want to talk in front of a group. I was a kid like that, but I really get them to speak. We start with little easy questions, but they must learn to speak. Like it's such an important thing as you get older, as you get to college, as you get into your career. You must be comfortable speaking to people and also expressing your feelings, expressing what you need from them. So I would leave it there. We can talk about that for a long time.
That might be a follow-up episode for that one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Happy to
Ian,
do it.
Thank you again for joining us today. How can people reach you, learn more about iSport 360? Where can they find you? Tell us a little about where we can locate more about what you're doing.
Yes. So our website address is isport360.com. I started this company because I felt like coaches, kids, and parents really need to do a better job of communicating, of sharing feedback, of supporting each other, of tracking kids' progress. So we created an app and we built a company around it. And I'd encourage everyone to take a look at it. This is absolutely not about creating elite athletes. It's about creating elite people, well-rounded people, and great teams and strong coaches. So I would love if your audience would take a look at it. isport360.com.
And I love that. Jason, I've talked about like well-rounded people. If we can develop more well-rounded people through sports, which really sport was created for that anyway, to develop a complete person through what we're doing. And if we did more of that, the world would be such a better place.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
From what I've heard too, I've heard it's like your iSport 360 app is like Team Snap but on steroids. That's what I've heard. So just throwing it out there.
I love, that's one of my favorite quotes. Team Snap is a very successful company, but if you feel like we have Team Snap on steroids, I'm thrilled with that metaphor.
Hey, Jason's right down your alley with iSport 360 because he always says you develop a better person, you have a better athlete, better player, right? And you're going to have more success on the field with doing that, or the court, or wherever.
That is true. So I took over my daughter's soccer team 4 years ago. They were in like the 6th worst division in our league, and I've taken a slow and steady approach using all the things we talked about today. And this past fall, they actually came in first place in the #1 division in our league. So something seems to be working right.
When's the movie coming out? What's the name of it? What's the name of the movie? So like the Bad News Bears, what's it going to be on this one?
Something along those lines, except I'm not the guy drinking beers and smoking in the dugout. I take a little bit of a little different approach.
More of a 21st century approach. Yeah.
Hey, yes. Go play ping pong against somebody, right? To try to win it, to try to get the kids to play for them, right?
Exactly. Yes. Good stuff. I really appreciate you guys having me here today, and I hope we can work to help each other.
Absolutely. And yeah, well, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and look forward to talking to you soon.
You got it. Cheers.
Thanks, Ian. Take care.
Well, Jim, in kids, the number of kids being involved in sports is dropping significantly over the last 13 years. 2008, 38% of kids played in, has been falling from 38 to about 45%. So it was at 45 in 2018 or 2008. Now it's down to 38%. So less kids are getting involved in sports, which is telling me they're not having much fun. So we've developed 40 athletes to create a little more fun, develop a whole holistic person, and get more kids involved.
Yeah, I mean, I think what, going back to our conversation with Ian, it's like, developing sports, and he's, has a company is trying to get individuals to have better experiences, become better, people through the sport. And that's the whole thing, with 40 athletes for us. So we started it. We see that a lot of people involved in sports, even though numbers could be declining, but they're still involved in it. And people are paying a lot of money, spend a lot of time in it. And the statistic we talk about a lot of times is like, 70% of kids by the time they're 13, they're quitting a particular sport. So they might have played a sport from kindergarten all the way to 8th grade, but then they quit by the time they get into high school and focus on another sport. So if you're spending all that time and energy on that particular sport, and they're not doing it really as much anymore, and they're not using that skill set, then is that money invested in time? Is that a value? But if you're teaching them to become better people through the sport and teaching them, we talk about the life skills and the character traits and be more 4-dimensional type person, a complete person, now you got value through what you invested that time and money in the sports they played. And that's
if you learn things like courage, power of positive attitude, those are skills you need the rest of your life. So, Jim, I really enjoyed this one today with Ian. So, I
enjoy it. Like, you just bring on great people. And Ian's another one of them. So I love the individuals you bring in, the conversation we have. So I appreciate all you do.
No problem, Jimmy. Well, hey, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and we're going to move right into March Gladness next after this one. So
sounds great. Take care, Jason. Our buddy.